Hey everyone, welcome back to Altengrad City in City Skylines. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, we are prepared for the city expansion on the other side of the river. So that's exactly what we will do today. In the last episode, we prepared a new bridge over the river and we also built a rather interesting river project, the Weir, with a hydroelectric power station and a ship lock, and also some industry. I should also mention that last time we filled the remaining empty blocks closer to the downtown. Anyway, let's see how the city expanded over the river. So I think I even mentioned this last time, that there are a couple of different options how I can do this expansion of the city on the other side of the river. So that's kind of going to be something I'm going to talk about, but first let me just say what we are going to start with. So we are doing some infrastructure that's pretty straightforward. So a couple of roads and also tram tracks, because we had the tram tracks, if you remember, going over the monastery island and going nowhere, just leading over the water and just ending kind of on a temporary loop. But we need to provide some final position where the trams are going to go. So that's exactly going to be this place. And I figured that since we built that train bridge a couple of episodes back, I think it was together with the tram depot episode. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it was also the industrial video, but it doesn't really matter. We have train tracks going also over the river. So why not build another, a smaller train station over here? And, since there is already going to be a train station, it might as well be some sort of a transportation hub for the public transport, for other means of public transport, all right? So that's going to be just like a terminus loop for the trams. We have seen these kinds of loops in the city before. So this actually took me a really long time on the stream because I was really trying to build a very nice looking geometry for the railway over here. It's not really super visible over here what I was trying to aim for, but I was really doing all those zoomed out shots of the entire city, kind of seeing, or not shots but views, just trying to see how the geometry is looking, because I was really trying to just make it look good, maybe slightly less functional, but just make it look good. This is not the final thing, by the way, but later I'm going to slightly improve it. So anyway, the railway just turns right into this direction, and there's going to be like a tiny little train station. It's not really going to be that tiny. It's going to have couple of tracks, but it's not really going to be anything special. Using the procedural objects there, I created like a custom train station building because I'm kind of limited by the selection of the train stations. So I want to just create my own custom ones, so I'm not going to repeat them. And some of the stations that I have, I just don't like, so I really want to create my own there. This also took me a really long time on the live stream because I was really struggling to make some of these tracks, and you could have seen me actually put a couple of fake connections, just overlapping some of the switches really, because I'm pretty sure that that's not where the trains are going to go anyway. If I'm going to put trains through this train station to actually stop here, which is a big if, then they are just going to go to those tracks that are closest to the station building, probably the 2 tracks, so I can serve both directions. But the 3rd track in the station is just purely decorative, right? So I don't really need to pay attention to that. I was kind of limited with by space, also by the train crossing. So that was just something, some kind of a simplification that I can afford to do. So this is going to be the important tram infrastructure. Now, this street that is leading up this hill, this area is fairly elevated. If you remember that railway bridge that was going over the river, it was also quite tall, and these tracks are pretty much on that same level. So we are fairly, higher compared to or relative to the water level in the river. So these tram tracks need to kind of go up a lot into this loop, and that main street that the trams are going on, I'm thinking that might be a bit of a new street, kind of refurbished maybe, or something straightened, let's say, because some of these other streets that I'm going to do in this area are going to be kind of distorted or not straight too much, to kind of symbolize that maybe they are a bit older and they were just part of some historical connections maybe. So the modern roads don't really follow like a perfectly straight shape, but this road might have been completely new. And obviously the road that goes parallel to the tracks, that's kind of clear that that's very recently built, or at least as recent as the tracks, because the tracks are not really following any natural historical path or something like that. So yeah, these tracks, very important. Now this is probably going to be the title of this video, what I'm going to build over here. This is going to be the garden city. Now there are a couple of so-called garden cities in real life in Germany. At least that's the inspiration that I took from Germany. But I suppose that this kind of style of buildings is similar elsewhere as well. Now, it was actually kind of funny because when I was doing this on the live stream, I had a couple of people come to the chat and say, oh, hey, you are building, buildings from like Sweden or Netherlands or something. And actually, I'm taking inspiration from Germany, but these buildings that I'm using in City Skylines are from Ireland. So that just shows how generic looking these buildings are, and I can easily pass them as structures that can be built in the 1930s in Altengrad in Central Europe. These buildings from Ireland are actually from 1930s, so at least the time period is right, even though the location doesn't exactly match. But like I said, these buildings are generic enough that I can easily have them in Altengrad. So what exactly is a garden city? It's I don't know, like a architectural concept, I suppose. I was not really digging into it that much. I suppose that it was suggested on the streams. Maybe someone just posted some kind of location, real life location, and I kind of liked it, so I decided to recreate it. So it's basically these rows of buildings. I suppose something similar you might see in the Great Britain, maybe. Some of these buildings in some rows. They are not really like row buildings, like totally. They are obviously separated. Only these smaller rows are present in here, and they are kind of disconnected. I tried to build different sizes of these rows because that's how it is in real life as well. So as you can see, you can already tell how this place is going to look like. It's just going to be this row, which is going to have the buildings next to the streets. The streets are fairly small. I used some one-way streets with parking in here. These buildings are probably kind of modern. Maybe people have cars who live here, maybe not, I'm not exactly sure. But these rows do have parking, so some of the parked 1930s vehicles will be over here. And also, you can see the gardens. I suppose that's where the name comes from, right? So these buildings have fairly large backyards, kind of narrow, so, that's how you might mistake these structures from, Great Britain, for example. That's kind of typical for that. But like I said, I mostly took inspiration from Germany here, so that's kind of Central Europe, at least, somewhat. Anyway, it's very simple thing to build in City Skylines. So I just slapped a couple of those buildings in there, did that path through the middle. I used that tilting ability from the node controller, did some fences, some hedgerows, and that's pretty much done. Later, I'm just going to decorate the insides of the backyards with some trees and some other decoration. It's a very nice thing to do in City Skylines, in Altengrad especially, because it fills a huge area. It's a low-density project, of course, and, low density and ease of construction in City Skylines is kind of what I'm aiming for with these low-density areas. So that was a perfect combination of things to do here. Now, before I continued further, I had to also think about the rest of the railways here. So that's why I did that bridge. I used the very nice looking Remagen bridge made by Revo. And I was probably building it wrong because I had to just put my own pillars in there. I mean, they are matching pillars. They just had to be placed manually. I suppose I just built it wrong. Doesn't really matter. The bridge looks absolutely amazing. I really wanted to have it somewhere in the city. And that felt like a really nice position. I already talked about some future spoilers or future plans for the railway infrastructure in the city on the streams, so you probably understand why I built that bridge if you've seen that. But I'm just trying to build like a ring connection around the city, or basically create possibly like different entries into the city. I think I can already spoil a tiny bit that I am taking inspiration from Budapest a lot. It also has like a lot of different railway corridors, let's say, coming into the city from different directions, and they have different train stations to serve that. But overall, the network is connected by like a ring around the city, right? Maybe even inside of the city. It doesn't really matter. I'm obviously not going to do it like one-on-one recreation, but yeah, the bridge is just a part of this ring connection. So that's just a preparation for some very future, very distant project. But in here it was necessary to have the geometry of the railways done, because I was building these areas to kind of fit that. I really wanted to have the railways go on the very edges of this place, because some of these structures in here might have been present before the railway, not the Garden City, of course. We are in the 1930s. The railway has been here since at least the end of the 19th century, so that's definitely older, the railway. But some of these older buildings that I'm placing around these parts are definitely older, so the railway just steered clear from all of them, and it only makes sense that it's just going all the way on the edges. By the way, the history of this place. I'm thinking that this was like a disconnected village or a small, really tiny town from Altengrad, from the main city. So this is something similar that we have seen before. I have built this pretty much on the exact opposite edge of the city. I built that disconnected little village. It also has a tram line going in there and a train station. But apart from, unlike that little town, it doesn't have the trams going to the train station. But, just some different variety I'm doing in here. So as the Altengrad city expanded, it eventually swallowed this entire village, and it just became a city district. That's why the trams are going in here, and a lot of this new 1930s or early 20th century housing is being built in this area. It's not really going to be like a huge district of the city, because I really want it to be the edge of the city. So I don't want to just expand it with some high density stuff indefinitely, right? I just really want to have low density things in here to just wrap it up, basically, the city in this part at least. So this is what I was talking about. I just changed the geometry of this bridge. I wasn't really all satisfied with this curve, because it was like a almost perfect 90-degree turn, which you rarely see in real life with railways. Obviously railways in real life are a bit unnatural looking, because they need to be kind of straight, not really respecting the terrain that much. But in this particular place, I really wanted to have it a bit more organic shaped, I guess. I don't know really how to explain it, but this connection just felt much better. What I did was just basically slightly straighten the connection by angling the bridge a bit, and the turn now can have a slightly higher radius, which is kind of more beneficial. By the way, in there I quickly placed a couple of very modern apartment buildings. You can see them on the side of that main road, and I'm thinking that might have been part of the main road project as well, right? So there might have been some different structures like wooden buildings or something along that old road, and when the road was just straightened, they built these kinds of modern structures. What I'm doing in here is something that I really wanted to liven up the place with, let's say. So, like I said, this might have been like a small town outside of the main city, but long time ago, it might have also just been this single mansion or chateau for some, nobleman, or maybe more recently for some like factory owners or someone like that. And eventually all these low density areas from Altengrad just expanded all the way up to this place, and this little building, this little chateau, just became the center of this area pretty much. And in front of it I decided to keep some space open and create maybe like a tiny town square. It's also very close to the train station, so a fairly important location. But I really wanted to just put something more interesting in here, because I was really struggling with the low density area. I really don't want to do these kinds of things all that much, just slapping low density buildings everywhere around the edge of the city and calling it done. Sure, it might be possible, but I'm just going to go crazy from doing that, because honestly it's not really super interesting to do the low density areas so uniformly and without any kind of these elements. So You will definitely see me do this a lot. Some kind of, I don't know, chateaus or, I don't know, church squares, for example, or train stations on the edges of the city, or just some different interesting projects to kind of, spice it up or something like that. Like I said, the low density areas are nice when they are, similarly to the high density areas, they are looking nice when they are big, when there are a lot of buildings, but they are just so not interesting to build, right? From my perspective, it is, at least. But when done, it's kind of satisfying to look at it. So it's kind of important to do it. But yeah, like I said many times before already, I just want to do some kind of interesting things in between it. All right, so eventually we had to start doing those low density blocks. So here we go. I prepared like a little palette of buildings, low density buildings, mostly from the European suburbia. So this place is actually kind of vanilla friendly, if you think about it, but also some different buildings from the workshop. And as you can see, I'm just copy pasting, I'm just selecting some buildings from the palette and putting them into the blocks really quickly, really randomly, honestly, because I really don't want to bother with these blocks too much. As you can even see by placing these fences, I really want to just have some detailing inside of these blocks, but I really don't want to overdo it. I really don't want to spend that much time with it because it's the quantity that mostly counts with this kind of low density expansion. So I think I even talked about this in Aurelia, that I want to just more focus the detailing on the one specific project, which is the focus of the video. So for example, for today's video, that's going to be the garden city, the train station, the chateau, for example, that I already detailed the backyard of. So that's going to be the most interesting thing. But the next interesting thing is going to be just the quantity of this low density area, right? So that's at least my justification for doing this, really. So we are done with that. I wasn't really showing that too much in the time lapse, how I did the low density buildings, but there was not much to show really, and it was actually going pretty fast as well. So I was really satisfied with how it turned out eventually, and this is just a very similar thing that I'm going to do all around the city to just fill up some of the edges. I'm also doing some of the decals as detailing. Decals are super important, and trees. Obviously lots of trees to just hide the fact that there is not much else in these backyards. With the garden city, I took a bit more care with the detailing, even though it's still quite light. I just did a couple of trees, kind of low trees, because this place is fairly new, so like super tall trees wouldn't really make that much sense. But doing some of these garden sheds, some benches and flowers and all these kinds of different like weeds and stuff. If you look at Google Maps at these places, they are looking kind of similar like this. There is not that much chaos in these backgrounds. They are actually kind of nice and orderly even. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping between these projects a bit. I finished detailing that one portion of the garden city that I did. I'm going to add a couple of more blocks there, but right now I really wanted to focus more on the train station. I'm thinking that the train station is not going to be finished after today's episode because the train station is on the very edge of this expanded area for today's episode. But if you've seen the entire map of the city or where I'm building, then there's like a hill. You can probably see that in these time-lapse shots as well. There's a hill behind this train station. There will have to be some extensive landscaping involved in just changing that area for some future expansion. I will also add a couple of very small villages, mostly on some intersections and stuff like that. But that's probably going to be when I'm going to return to the train station and kind of finish the edges of it, because I really want it to blend in with that landscaping that I'm going to do in the future, and I'm just not sure of at this moment, right? So we're just going to leave that. But I eventually still did a couple of like warehouse buildings on the other side of the track, some mud road, and just some detailing even with the platforms that I'm probably going to show you more in the time lapse. Also, very important thing, we also need to finish this tram infrastructure, so especially the loop. So let's talk a bit about this tram line. So I have two lines that are going into this area. Maybe one line is eventually going to go somewhere else, but I'm not really sure of it right now, because one line is the one that goes from, I think, the industrial zone right now. So that's kind of like a temporary line that I only wanted there because of the cinematics, but maybe that's going to change. What am I going to do right here? So I need to put wires over those tram tracks because I really want to have custom wires. I'm using lots of custom intersections here, obviously treated with the node controller, so I need to have my own wires to actually go over the tracks and over the loop. I'm using a completely different technique this time. So I copied the entire infrastructure for the trams in that area because I decided to just kind of unify the style of the wires. So I'm just going to do the custom wires in that entire area. It's just going to be easier if you think about it. I just selected all of those roads, copied them, copy-pasted them to the very edge of the map. Now, why is that? Because if you have wires, any kind of wires outside of the usual 25 tile area, then for some reason they are going to turn blue. So they are easily visible, right? That's perfect for me. I copied it there, the road, and I turned it into a custom prepared network, which is only the wires from the networks, from the tram networks made by Klus. Now, the very good thing about that is if you're going to switch that, then the networks will already have the wires elevated above the actual road. So you can just copy paste it back into the place after you deal with the geometry and improvements, and you're done. I kind of made a mistake there because when I copied it, it actually changed the elevation slightly, so I kind of destroyed that advantage, but I'm learning, so next time I'm going to do it right. But it was actually very nice. It went really fast. Doing these kinds of wires is always a bit scary for me. I really don't want to do it, but using this technique, it's actually going pretty fast, so I don't think I'm going to be really all that afraid of doing the custom wires in the future. In the city, throughout the city, I only limited the custom wires to the intersections because that's where they have to be. But maybe I am going to later do these kinds of custom wires in some larger areas. Anyway, that was the tram loop. Completely done. I also did some like bushes and stuff like that, some benches, some detailing, street lights. But now I want to do the last thing for today. Is it the last thing? No, actually it's not. But it's the train station detailing. Not really the train station complete, but just some platforms. So I also added the water tower for water, for the locomotives, obviously. We are still in the steam era. And I also added some of those water, I'm not sure how they're called, the things that are just going to turn and put water into the engines. And we also need to do some kind of a path between the platforms. I think I did it on that other train station on the opposite side of the city. I just did it by having the platforms and some kind of a random detailed paths through the tracks. But in here, I actually took the care and I did these little like cuts in the platforms, as you can see, the little recessed areas. And between them, I kind of synchronized them, obviously, on all three platforms. And then I did these like concrete, or I'm not really sure how to call them, just these paved connections through the place. And interestingly, I also could use the node controller for the platform right next to the building, the station building, because obviously the recessed area only needs to be towards the track and not towards the building. So I also had to use the tilting feature of the node controller, and it turned out looking absolutely perfect. Maybe in the future I'm going to add a couple of more paths there, but it's not exactly all that necessary. I think I'm going to judge that when I'm actually going to put trains there, all right? So this is the finished result. And as you can see, the city was expanded quite a bit. Like I mentioned before, it's just a low density stuff, so the quantity is what eventually matters most. But some interesting projects are obviously hidden in that expansion as well. So probably the train station mostly, and the neighboring tram loop, all right? So unfortunately, I don't have the before shot for some of these cinematics, so we will just have to see the expansion as it was after the episode. I'm going to add some farmlands between some of those cuts in those residential blocks here and there, but I'm going to do that all with that episode that I already mentioned, with the landscaping and the train station finishing and all those kinds of things. Also, I did not finish the part right next to the river, as you can see here. I'm not really sure what's going to be there. I'm thinking of maybe some kind of little marina, or something like that. Obviously lots of like willow trees and all those kinds of nice decorations, but that's just something to be decided, really. This is the tram loop. As you can see, it's looking really nice. It serves two lines. You can probably tell how it works from this shot. Again, it's probably going to trigger a lot of people in the comments, just like the previous loops with double tracks going in opposite directions, but that's how it works, right? You can see that in this cinematic. So one tram enters the loop from one side, unloads people, continues to the opposite side and loads people, and the opposite line just enters the loop from the different directions, so they can just pass each other, right? Again, it's something that is done in real life, not everywhere, of course, maybe not in every country, I don't know, but I have seen it, so, I'm just going to build it over here. In the next episode, we are going to continue expanding some of these low-density areas and probably connect them to the high-density areas that are on the tip, on the confluence of the river. I have one very special project planned for that area, so, stay tuned for that, and we are just going to see this place nicely done. Probably not by the next episode, but some of the other episodes I will really try to focus on this place a lot, all right? Anyway, that is going to be all for today's building, but before you go, let me say a couple more things. As always, if you liked the video, you can help it, as well as the channel, by clicking the thumbs up button below it, writing a comment, and sharing it. Also, if you want to directly support the channel and my work, you can become a channel member through the join button below or the first link in the video description. Huge thanks to all 5 of our current channel members, at least 5 when I'm making the video on the 23rd of January. The channel membership is something like the subscription on Twitch or like Patreon, if you are familiar with that. Speaking of Twitch, I'm currently doing weekly live streams there. Link to that channel should be in the video description, and you will also see the schedule on that channel. Anyway, that is absolutely all. Thanks for watching and for the support, and I will see you next week on the bus ride through Aurelia. Take care and goodbye.